for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by for another episode of TC and Friends Monday Night Musings. Glad to have you guys here. I wish I could say that I'm glad to continue to talk about the injustices that took place in the case of Spencer Summerfield's death and how his mother Marcy and the rest of his family were impacted by that. It's not the most exciting in the sense of uplifting conversation you can have for a Monday Night Musings, but it's an incredibly important one that and why we continue to have it. So I'll be bringing Marcy in here in just a few minutes. Want to go through all the stuff that I do all the time. One big shout out to IMAV from Subscribestar for being a show producer, and the Angry Vet from here on YouTube for being the same. I cannot thank you two enough, but also I want to thank all of the channel subscribers and all the channel members. All of you act localists are incredibly important to me. As you watch this, I want you to be thinking ahead to Wednesday evening. Wednesday evening, I am going to be live streaming city council meeting, and it is going to be from here in Spring Valley, it is going to be fiery, folks, because there's going to be a lot of stuff getting talked about and a lot of people speaking. And the people of Spring Valley have voted in spectacular fashion and sent a loud message, very clear message to the leadership. You guys know I hate that term when it comes to public servants, but to the city council and the mayors, the mayor of that's currently sitting, that they want some change in this town and they want it for the better. And there are some shenanigans going on behind the scenes to try and shut some stuff down before the mayor-elect, Justin Maliner, takes his seat in January. And man, did he win handily. Like almost 3 times the vote from the other, 3 times more votes than the other person that was running against him. And boy, they shut her down quick. And Justin's a good dude. He's a liberty-minded individual who you guys are going to enjoy getting to know as we stream more and more city council meetings. And so be looking forward to that on Wednesday night. Normally they're on, I think it's Monday nights. Yeah, so normally they're on Monday nights, but today is Veterans Day as you're watching this. So big shout out to all my fellow vets, and to include IMAV and the Angry Vet, strangely enough, but also to my co-host on Veteran Nation, Skipper, Mike Skipper Arthur. He and I co-host Veteran Nation together over on the Veteran Nation channel, which is brought to you by NRN, New Right Network. And a big shout out to a vet I haven't heard from in a very long time, Juan, who was our show producer and our network owner for Right America Media. Juan's a great guy, and I know he took a break from Right America Media for a while, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Juan again. So, and to all you other vets, thank you for serving. Thank you for being worth serving, and thank you for putting your name on that line, raising your hand, and swearing an oath to keep and defend the Constitution of the United States, to keep and defend the Republic, to protect it from enemies, foreign and domestic. And what we're learning today, folks, is that some of the worst enemies we have to the success of liberty and the survival of the Republic and the Constitution of the United States are politicians and public servants, because they are all about politicking and very little about public service. So if you like the show, please share it out. Hit the like button. Comments. We love comments. We'll be interacting in the chat with you as we're going through all of this. Marcy will be interacting with you. I will be interacting with you. Ask questions. Ask Marcy what you can do to support her. I think she's going to have some new information for us tonight. And if you really like what we do and you want to support, you could head over to Subscribestar, or you could join as a channel member here and become an ACT localist. So thank you very much, folks. So without any further ado, we're going to bring in the actual star of the show. I'm just going to put Marcy up on screen by herself for the whole time.
What?
Yeah, you're just all by yourself, Marcy.
Oh, no.
We've seen the three faces of Marcy now because she has the same shirt on every time, but her hair has been different for each episode.
I'm showing my curls. Well, today anyways.
Marcy and I had the opportunity to meet face-to-face this week. We connected over something, and that was, believe it or not, it's not often that I meet people in person that I have on the show. So we had that opportunity. It was very nice. So thank you very much for that nice chance to meet, Marcy. I really appreciate it. So
You're welcome. It was good to meet you.
how's reception been from the people you're talking to of the previous first two episodes that we've had you on for?
They've been really good, actually. A lot of people have supported me and shared out the video on Facebook, and some of my coworkers have talked to me about it and said, "Oh, I didn't know you were going through it this bad." My sister reprimanded me for me feeling bad for having her the one that told our parents that Spencer was killed, and I still feel bad about that. Sorry, Vicky.
I don't. Yeah, there's no reason for you to feel bad about that.
Well, I do.
I know, and we're soundly chastising you right now to stop that. So stop that. Hush. But you've even heard from some, and we won't say names unless you want to, but you've even heard from some elected public servants in Wabasha County that they are paying attention, and it's been reported to us that Mr. Matt Stinson has been talking about last week's episode, especially.
Yes, he has been, and that's why I've been notified that all the commissioners have seen the video. So I'm hoping Mr. Stinson and the commissioners are watching tonight, and maybe they can understand and have a little empathy and compassion for the killing of my son. It's a tragedy.
You're asking an awful lot.
I know.
People to have empathy these days. So I do want to get this right out of the gate, because tonight's episode is going to be a little different than the other two. The other two were very much timeline fact, and not that we're not going to be talking about facts tonight, but the first two episodes are very much, here's what happened at this time with these people. These people witnessed it, and obviously we didn't name witness names, by the way. If you're one of the witnesses to the accident and you would like to talk about what you experienced both before the accident, during the accident, and afterwards, and how you were treated, I'm open, and I will do what I can to tell your story in whatever way works best for you. But we would love to get your story out, because it's very important to the totality of Spencer's cause. And so reach out. But tonight's episode's different because we're going to be talking about some factual connections and asking the audience to begin to draw some conclusions that are going to be somewhat subjective, but not necessarily devoid of objective reality. And what I mean by that, and Marcy knows because before we started recording, we talked through some of this, is that we can draw a lot of conclusions about things and even have opinions that are fact-based, but that doesn't mean that we're saying anything tonight with 100% certainty that this is exactly what happened. And the problem with what we're going to be talking about tonight is that we can have some very strong suspicions, and a lot of you are going to draw the same conclusions that both Marcy and I and others have drawn, and we're never going to be able to state without any equivocation that we know for a fact that's what happened, even though deep inside, Marcy and I have reached the same conclusion about what happened. And when you start to hear what some of these connections are, I would love to hear how you arrive at the conclusions you arrive at after you hear what Marcy and I have to say. So this may not be as long as the last episode. Of course, I never learned to shut up, so this may not be as long as the last couple of episodes. But there's something that we're going to be talking about at the end that Marcy told me she'd like to float to all of you, and I'm looking forward to getting to that part. But Marcy, without any more beating around the bush, Mr. Stinson is well connected Matt Stinson is well connected in Wabasha County and Lake City in particular. To start with, as the elected county attorney, he has connections with every other department and every other board in the county. Now, we watched, and I'm going to try and find that video and timeline stamp it. We watched this week as the county commission of Wabasha County pushed very hard on Mr. Stinson about his communication efforts and skills and responsibilities with all the other departments in the county. And we learned some things there that he's not very communicative with them, which ties into the reality that he didn't communicate with you at all. Correct. But he also has ties to those boards by way of his location to now a former board member who is the grandfather of the individual who pled guilty to the causing the accident that took Spencer's life. Who's that now former board member?
Well, his name is Curtis Meyer.
So Curtis Meyer, some people listen to this. Not only was he a board member while all this was going on, not on the county commission, it was the
Board of Adjustments.
He was on the Board of Adjustments while all of this was going on. So Curtis Meyer was on the Board of Adjustments for Wabasha County while all of this was going on, but he's also neighbors with Mr. Stinson.
Correct. Mr. Stinson's parents' farm.
Yeah.
They had an apple orchard, and I'm sorry. They came to the area in 1978 and bought a bit of land and established an apple orchard. And Mr. Stinson wasn't even born yet. And the Meyer family is really into milking. I think it's Jersey cows. Their farm is 9 miles from where Stinson grew up with his siblings.
So, and people are like, well, 9 miles doesn't make you... No, folks, in Wabasha County, 9 miles makes you neighbors because there's literally really nobody else between them. That's farmland. Right. So going back to really before his birth, Stinson's family had connections to the Myers family.
Well, I'm not exactly sure if they had connections or not, but they were... Right. They could have been very good friends.
Or not. They may have, could have been Hatfields and McCoys going on over there. We don't know, but we do know that they, grew up in that area.
Correct.
And
well, the one thing I do want...
Go ahead.
Sorry. The one thing I do want to reiterate is the Meyer farm is in Wabasha County and the Stinson farm is in Goodhue County.
But
the Stinson family, the kids... their address is Lake City, so all their activities resolved in Lake City. The kids went to school in Lake City. Right. And they did attend church in Lake City as well, because I found that out on one of the obituaries I researched.
Yeah, see, Marcy doesn't have a lot of downtime, but when she does have downtime, she does a lot of digging for herself. So, and this is what happens when you violate somebody, folks. I'm working with Pam, and some of you have already seen the first video I did with Pam, and I'm hoping that by the time you guys watch this video, the second video that I am working on for Pam is ready. But man, it is kicking my butt, to be honest with you. There's so much to go over. But Pam's the same way. But Pam and Marcy aren't alone.
Correct.
What you end up dealing with, and quite frankly, I asked this question of Marcy, and I asked this question of Pam, I asked this question of everybody. Where were you before all of this? Were you a rah justice system, rah back the blue, rah, and every time Marcy and Pam are no outliers here. Is I was back the blue. Yeah, I was all justice system. And now you find yourselves burned by that system that you had kind of given your, no offense, but kind of thoughtless approval and support to, only to get screwed by the system that you had given your thoughtless approval and support to.
Correct.
Which drives you down the road that you went into, like, okay, so what's going on here? I'm going to start seeing who Mr. Stinson's connected to.
And it took me quite a while to find that out. It wasn't easy. When Spencer was killed, I didn't even know what the mother's maiden name was. It took me a long time to figure that out. I found that out way after sometime in April. I found that out. So it just took me a long time. And then I'm still learning things every day as time goes on. There's, something that stands out to me. It's like, that could be worth investigating as well. I shouldn't have to do this.
No. And that's, and there again, I want people to understand it. No time has Marcy ever come up to me and said, and because Mr. Meyer's daughter's name is Becky, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And no time has Marcy ever come up to me and said that Becky or what's
the
Jim?
Dad, Corey?
Jim. No, not Corey. Not her husband.
Oh.
Her dad, Jim.
Kurt.
At no point, folks, this is why we are a professional show here at Minnesota Black Road Regiment Podcast. We never forget names or anything like that. At no point has Marcy ever come up to me and said that Becky and Kurt paid off Matt Stinson to give their son or their grandson a slap on the wrist and a now don't do it again. No, at no point has she said that. And no point have I ever said that. Never said that. Never even hinted at it being the reality. Saying there are threads of connection that need to be drawn. And when you grow up in an area where you basically are straddling the border of Goodhue County and Wabasha County, your farms are basically your orchard farm, your dairy farm are basically butting up against each other. You are riding the same buses more than likely to school. You're going to the same school functions. You're going to the same church functions. You know people. You know these people, and there's no way in the world that doesn't taint your ability to be objective. There's no way. There's no way it doesn't taint your ability to be objective. Doesn't mean you're not going to do the right thing. Not saying that. Saying your ability to be objective and to be neutral and execute justice the way it should be done is going to be hindered, if you will. And that's over just a couple of connections, just one. But it doesn't end there. Because go ahead, Marcy.
Well, I recently found out, I guess it's not so recently ago, but that Becky and Matt's older sister did go to school together. They were in the same grade. So how do I know that these two children, they're going to school from kindergarten to 12th grade. They're on the honor roll together. That's how I made that connection. And then the dad, Corey, graduated.
Applause for being on the honor roll.
Right.
I achieved like the B honor roll like twice. So
well, I didn't. I'm dyslexic, so I didn't do very good in school. I had my horses, and that was the only thing that mattered.
But so yeah, applause Becky and Mr. Stinson's older sister for being on the honor roll. That's great. Good for you.
But it just is concerning to me that those two children could have, went to I mean, could have been very good friends, spent the night at each other's houses, did a lot of activities together. I just don't know.
Well, it's all of us remember, if you had an older sibling, especially if you if your older sibling you're a guy and your older sibling is a girl, and her best friend or one of her friends is a girl, and you're spending a lot of time together, like, you notice these things, guys. Sorry, guys, you notice the older girls. Like, there's
Hmm.
no way he didn't know
Right.
them. There's no way he hasn't known Becky for decades now. There's no way. There's no way he didn't know who the driver was and who he was related to the second he heard about the accident.
Correct.
And we have, once again, eyewitness testimony from people who were at the accidents, who were at the accident following Spencer, who observed the accident, had first responders, got out of the cars and came over and said, "We know the kid. He's a good guy." Or his family they're good people. Folks, this is the problem with nepotism. You think you can avoid it, but it's everywhere. And yet here we are watching a guy who's connected to the family of the person who killed Spencer, basically saying, "No, I can handle this. I can do this." And yet he got a slap on the wrist.
He did. And well, as I've stated before, I had two lawyers look at the evidence and stuff like that, and they said Stinson wasn't doing his job and charging correctly.
And
And
tell people a little bit about this, because this plays in. You had one attorney from out of state that you
yeah,
paid to investigate.
no, I didn't pay.
Or
I
not
didn't
paid.
pay.
You reached
It was
out
a
to, excuse
friend
me. Yeah, it was
because
a
I
friend.
knew she would tell me the truth,
Right.
and I needed the truth.
You
And I never
you
asked her to do it. I just had her look and I said, "Is this the charge that he should be charged with?" And she said she wrote him a note, and we sent it off. I sent it off, and then he said he wasn't going to talk to an anonymous lawyer.
anonymous
So I gave,
lawyer from some other state.
yeah,
So
well,
then you
and
sought out somebody in Minnesota.
correct. I sought out another lawyer in Minnesota, and he wasn't, she came up with the same thing. So he wasn't doing his job. And that just makes me irritated. And I think that's why I got so mad that on June 26th and said, what I said is Spencer should be in jail and not 6 foot under.
And
And
there again, what she's
and
saying, not that Spencer should be in jail, but if Spencer if the roles had been reversed and Spencer
mhm,
had been the one driving and made the sharp swerve into the other person's car and took the other person's life, Marcy would advocate for him to do some jail time.
correct.
But yet here we sit looking at two attorneys, and the thing that pisses me off about that is I'm not going to get into some argument with some anonymous attorney from another state. That's your job. That like literally your job is to be neutral and objective on these things.
He
And
wasn't neutral and objective. He only knew about what he wanted to hear, and that was the defendant's testimony. He never looked at, I don't think he read the file. That's just my personal opinion because the evidence was there. And I asked him,
did
and
you
he
get
said
written
yes, but I don't believe him.
did you get written statements from those two attorneys?
Yeah, I do have them.
Are those things that we could get screen grabs of?
Right now?
No, not right now, but
Oh,
that we could get
yeah,
screen grabs of?
absolutely.
Because I will put them up here on the YouTube channel under my community page where I can actually post pictures.
Okay.
And we'll put those statements up because I think that's really powerful, that when you have two people, and admittedly one was a friend, but you trust her to tell the truth and to be honest with you and hold you accountable and say, like, "Hey, look, no, you're kind of pulling, you're pulling at strings that don't need to be pulled at here." You trust her to
Oh,
do that. But then you went to another one you didn't know.
correct.
And that one came up with the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like you're like, "Here, I'll give you $20,000 to come up with the conclusion that I want you to come up with. You're like, look at this. Tell me what you believe the proper procedure would be in this situation. And that attorney agreed with your friend, who's an
Correct.
attorney.
Correct.
So I think putting those up is would be very powerful. And so we'll get those up as soon as this video drops.
And then I have filed motions with complaints against Mr. Stinson to the OLPR up in the cities, and they have been denied just because I do a terrible job at writing. So hopefully I can get something together here in the next week and get that up there.
She
What?
She does fine. She's not a terrible writer.
So anyways,
she's not going to let me say
yes, no, I'm not. And then I'll get that sent up there. And I did find some more documentation about conflict of interest too, that Stinson did send it to Pam about conflict of interest with people that are on the board and people who are employed through Wabasha County. And they did they did fix it, and they don't have a conflict of interest. They fixed it after the defendant was charged. So that's another rabbit hole that my mind went down to, wondering, is Spencer's death, are they changing it to because it just happened, or are they changing it because they just want the conflict of interest out of their procedures or whatever it's called?
Well, keep in mind too that the press release at the time that Spencer was killed was, and this victim wasn't wearing a seatbelt.
Correct.
Nothing about, no other factual statements at all, which I understand because it's an investigation that needs to take place. But if it's an investigation that needs to take place, then why are we releasing information about the victim, which taints the public jury pool, if you will, and gets people to say, see, that's why you got to wear seatbelts. That's why these seatbelt laws exist, is so that you don't die, at the hands of someone else. And maybe he should have been wearing a seatbelt. I'm opposed to seatbelt laws. It's my life. Like, there's literally no.
Spencer was like that too. Sorry.
Now I wear my seatbelt because I know that I don't want to give these guys any opportunity to write me a ticket. I don't know why, but I feel like they may not like me.
That's because you're speaking truth.
But I'm not advocating that anyone not follow any laws. I'm just advocating that people start to think through all of the stupid laws. But for a state patrol officer, or for a state patrol public relations officer to come out and say, in the midst of what is now an investigation, that the victim, the deceased one, the killed one, wasn't wearing a seatbelt, when they can't release or won't release anything else, is just asinine. It's an asinine thing to do. And it was the first of many asinine things, or right in the beginning of a lot of other asinine things that took place and didn't need to. So there's some other stuff going on by way of influence in Lake City and Wabasha County too, that people really should be paying attention to. The convicted individual, folks, he pled guilty. He's a convict, maybe not a felony, but he pled guilty, and that makes him, convicted. He's convicted of this. This convicted individual's family owns numerous businesses. Let's talk a little bit about some of the different businesses that operate there in Lake City and Wabasha. And the reason Lake City is so important to this is that that's where the county seat is. That's where all of this stuff takes place. So tell us a little bit about those connections.
In Lake City is where the accident happened too. So, there's board members who are members of the family that are on the Lake City School Board now. They own the Lake City Graphic. There's a few construction companies that are owned by the family. People don't want to come forward from school because I've asked the people that I knew of that heard the child bragging about, you know, bragging about the accident or whatever he did, and they won't submit a written statement. So the family is scared. I'm not scared because I don't live in Lake City. I don't live in Wabasha County, so I'm going to speak up. And there are some pretty brave souls in the county who are speaking up and supporting me and getting my the story out of Spencer, because they love Spencer. Spencer was a good kid. And then I want to talk to about something that we did not know. At the night of Spencer's visitation, I'm not sure if I said this all right, that another family member of the family was working. That was the funeral attendant, and he was extremely rude. It was about 6:30 in the evening, half an hour to go, and there was still a long line. He goes, "You got to get these people out." I'm like, "What am I supposed to do? Kick them out?" I don't know.
Yeah,
So I started walking.
I think we may have mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. You're dealing with a funeral home. You're doing a visitation, and Spencer, and as everybody knows, like the older you get, the smaller your visitations are. It's just like at this point, I'm 54. If I die between now and like 59, when my dad was killed, there will be like 5 people waiting in line for me. But when you're Spencer's age, because Spencer was how old again?
26.
Spencer was 26. When you're Spencer's age, most of your friends and connections from school and everything like that, other people that you've worked with, they're still around. And a young, tragic death like this impacts a community in a way that people can't grasp unless they've been through it. Like on the grieving side, that people come out of the woodwork
Spencer was a well-liked kid,
and
they loved
then
him.
You throw in Meadow Valley, where he was incredibly active, incredibly active,
and
you've got a family member of Curtis Myers and Becky, the mother of the convicted individual, the person who killed Spencer, a family member working in the funeral home, working the funeral home that night, now rushing the family out. Now, that doesn't indicate that there's somehow a cover-up, but it shows just how completely devoid of empathy and compassion some of these people can be. And it's the same story as how you were treated by Stinson, and even how Becky posted on social media about the accident. Not ever anything other than a passing. Oh, and also think of the other people who were impacted by this accident. What?
And at that point, I'm pretty sure she knew that Spencer was dead. And I'm sure
there's no way she didn't know. There's no way she didn't know.
And then I want to reiterate, I mean, the accident happened on 63, and I had to cross that to go pick out flowers for Spencer. I had to cross that to go to the visitation. I had to cross that to go to the funeral. How devastating is that to have to drive by that all the time? And I still have to drive by that all the time when I go up in that area, and it sucks.
And this is how interconnected all of this stuff is in Lake City and in Wabasha County. Like, even in the moment of your greatest grief and saying goodbye to your son, a family member of the driver who killed Spencer is involved in the funeral planning.
Yes.
Excuse me. There's no way to avoid these connections, and we're supposed to believe that Matt Stinson escaped all influence in this from outside forces, from the family members. There's no way I believe that they didn't have any influence on any of this, that they didn't talk about this at a social gathering, at wherever these people hang out in Lake City, where their hangouts are. I mean, everybody knows that everybody like this has a place that they hang out, like a brewery or a tap house or a distillery or something. There's some place these people hang out together.
Well,
There's no way they didn't talk about this.
right. I truly believe that Matt was called that night, and I'm not sure how it is, who gives the order to do arrests or whatever, but I'm pretty sure Matt knew that night, shortly after the accident killed Spencer. Becky, right. So I'm guessing. That would be really nice to know what kind of phone calls were made that night.
So the family owns a newspaper.
Yeah.
They own construction companies, contractors around
Mhm.
town. They're deeply in familiar with the ins and outs of the county board, or the county commission. With board, obviously, Curtis Myers on a board in the county, which is an appointment. It's an appointment. You have to be appointed to the board, which means you have to be nominated by a board member.
Which also happens to be a neighbor to Curtis Meyer and Mr. Stinson. And then the funny thing,
And his
and
name
then
is.
Rick Powers.
So you've got a neighbor of Curtis Meyer, and Matt Stinson appoints Curtis Meyer to the Wabasha County Board of Adjustment and there again, if the politics of it plays out the way it should, it would be like, I'm nominating this individual, and then the board votes to approve the appointment. And so once again, you've got Kurt Meyer living close to the Stinson family farm or orchard.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Power living as neighbors too, appointing Meyer. They all know Stinson. They had to know him because he runs for a county attorney.
Well, and then they grew up he grew up there his whole life. So I'm not sure
his whole life.
Right.
All of these connections, and there again, not saying that the Board of Adjustment has any power over the county attorney, that somehow Kurt Meyer, as being on the Board of Adjustment, can go up to Stinson and go, you better make this go away. That's not what we're saying. What we want people to point out for themselves and to figure out for themselves is there's no way at all. If Marcy and her family cannot escape that family during funeral planning, there's no way these connections weren't going on and firing on all cylinders after the funeral, leading up to the conclusion of the investigation, leading up to the charging decision that was made. And heaven forbid Marcy and Jeff hadn't started to ask some questions, there may not even have been charges.
Correct.
Because the county attorney is the final authority on charging. They really are. And sometimes Stinson made, in one case that we're looking at, Stinson made the right decision and chose not to go forward with charges that were suggested by Plainview PD. But he did nothing to protect the person who was abused by the Plainview PD either. So we know that he can choose to not charge, but one has to wonder if Matt Stinson would have chosen to do any charges if you and Jeff had not raised your voices and started to ask some questions.
Well, and then another thing that happened is after we met with Matt and Heidi on March 26th, the day after, I do have proof of this as well, that Rick Powers said that Curtis Meyer resigned from his Board of Adjustment position. But why did he resign that time? Why didn't he resign, months ago after the crash? I'm not saying that these two are related or Curtis used his board position to get to Stinson. They were neighbors. But I'm just concerned about, I hired a lawyer. I had talked to the judge and, brought that up numerous times. And not once did Matt Stinson tell me, or Matt Stinson didn't tell me that he resigned from that position. And
Right.
to me, why didn't he? Why wouldn't he come clean with me? That to me is like really kind of concerning.
the thing that's unsettling about him pointing out that Curtis resigned from the Board of Adjustment was it's almost it. You know
Oh,
what it
another
strikes?
commissioner told me that
Yeah.
another commissioner told me that Kurt Meyer resigned and gave me the date, and I found that out myself. But why didn't Stinson say, "Hey, he's done. He's not even on the board"?
Well, and so here's me pushing back a little bit. He probably didn't think it mattered, but what I'm looking at is you've got Stinson, who's responsible for prosecuting in Wabasha County and handling prosecutions for different cities under, as we now know, under contract with other cities,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe not handling those as well. But you have Kurt Meyer resigning after the accident, and a statement's made about him, wanting to go and enjoy his retirement and yada yada yada. But it almost reeks of, I got to make sure it looks like there's distance between me and Stinson.
Correct.
In much the same way that Becky's social media post immediately following the accident, was glad the phone was in his pocket. When you start to connect these things and you start to see how these things play out, it's a slow burn towards plausible deniability of any actual guilt on the part of the driver or on the part of the family in pulling strings to make sure the driver, the accused, the convicted one, doesn't end up, getting off with a slap on the wrist. So we have to distance ourselves, and we have to build this narrative ahead of time. Phone was in his pocket. Okay, that's taken care of. We don't have to deal with that. We've addressed that. Phone was in his pocket. Oh, I'm resigning from the Board of Adjustment because I don't want it to be seen how closely connected to Stinson I am as being a part of the county government. And to me, I'm like, if there's nothing to hide, if there's no undue influence, if there's no influence peddling here, then just stay on the board instead of saying, "Oh, I'm resigning so I can go enjoy my retirement." Like, come on, the Board of Adjustment, is that really that stressful? Like, you need downtime from that? It's Wabasha County, for the love of Pete. It's no offense to Wabasha County. It's a beautiful county.
Well, they
But,
didn't even have any meetings in January, February, or March, so I
well,
don't know
maybe, I
what
don't
the
know.
big
Maybe
deal
that's
was.
an opportune time to resign from that and retire and go about your business. But the connections reek, folks. There's just no way that when you're a county attorney who's making over $150,000 a year, by the way, and wants to continue to make over $150,000 a year, by the way, there's no way that when you're making $150,000 a year in Wabasha County, you're not one of the top income earners in Wabasha County. That's a lot of money in Wabasha County.
Mm-hmm.
That's a ton of money in Wabasha County. There's no way he's probably not the top paid person in Wabasha County, outside of maybe the county administrator, who I would be really shocked came anywhere near making that much money. And I don't care if you got a law degree. That's a terribly large burden to place on people in a county that, yes, has tourism through Lake City and the access to the river, but the people of Wabasha County in a large part aren't like super wealthy. It's not like coming to Olmsted, where you've got this large percentage of people in Rochester, Stewartville, and Byron who are very closely affiliated with things like Mayo Clinic and stuff, and are making, doctors and lawyer level wages. That's a 150,000 plus whatever odd number of dollars comes in there. And that blows my mind that there's no way anybody could possibly not suspect there's some sort of influence, even accidental, even incidental happening. And I better not go too hard on this because it could ruin my reputation. These people might turn on me, and I really like this cushy job. Because, as we learned, they took no cases to trial last year.
Correct.
None. And his excuse was, a lot of civil cases, and we're getting caught up on COVID, and we did a lot of plea deals, and on and on and on. And
And what
go
he
ahead.
talked about $100 too, but setting up the courtroom and just I don't remember his exact.
Well, and having to have
but
two attorneys, two staff members, one in the
Yep.
courtroom and one handling everything else. And I'm like, we didn't ask you to put this kid on trial for first degree homicide. It's not. It's not what we asked for. But and I get it. Like, trust me, prosecutors, county attorneys, they want convictions, and they don't care how they get them. If they can get them through plea deals, they'll get them. My non-legal advice to everyone is never take a plea deal unless you know for a fact you did it and you're going to get found guilty. But you never take a plea deal. Make them go to trial. Make them go to trial. Because when you don't make them go to trial, then your county attorney, the prosecuting attorney, is really getting paid to just sign off on a piece of paperwork that some intern or other person, which he's also arguing for now in that same county board meeting.
Yeah,
but
I know.
I would love to have a paralegal get and do all this for me because it would save me a lot of time. So then I could just go back, reread it, and sign off on it. Like, dude, you didn't even take anything to trial last year, so what's the problem? Like, once again, Marcy, you're not saying that having grown up with Becky. Yeah, and then let's just say he grew up with her. There's just that's the best way to say it. Having grown up with Becky, gone to the same school as Becky, gone to the same church functions or whatever, family. Maybe they didn't go exactly the same church, but there's a lot of these connections going on. He's neighbors to all these people. He moves in the same circles as all these people. He just does. There's no way around it. He moves in these circles. He's supported by the people in these circles that this kid is related to. Correct. You're not saying that for a fact there was any sort of influence or malfeasance. You're not saying that that for a fact, but it's something that's worth exploring, right?
Correct.
And he denied that he was going to have any ability or any inability to adjudicate this in a reasonable and neutral way.
Correct. Well, he
refused to recuse himself, really.
Right, he refused to. And I did say I think you have, brought up my suspicions and stuff like that. And he goes, well, I don't think I have a conflict of interest. And he told me that he'd put it on record with the court, and he chose not to do that in court. And that was after the plea was read, and we didn't have an opportunity to, say our piece before the plea was read, and like we were supposed to, and just too many things just don't add up. He's either incompetent or there's a reason for his actions.
It could be both.
Oh, that's true.
But at the best case scenario, it's incompetence. Best case scenario. And best case scenario, does an incompetent county attorney deserve to be the county attorney? And does he deserve $150,000+ a year that are being paid on the backs of the wage slaves of Wabasha County and ultimately across the entire state of Minnesota and ultimately across the entire United States? Because there's not a single agency and there's not a single prosecutor's office, if you want to use that terminology, that doesn't receive federal funding. There's not a single county attorney's office in the state of Minnesota that doesn't receive money from everybody in the state of Minnesota. There's just no way around that. His salary is paid literally by everybody in the state of Minnesota and ultimately by everybody in the United States. And so he's not just failing Wabasha County. He's failing you, and you don't live in Wabasha County.
Correct.
He's failing you. And your tax dollars are still supporting him. So he's getting paid $150,000 to not take anything to trial last year.
Correct.
At all.
It's sickening.
We're talking about a guy who gave a slap on a wrist to a cop in Plainview over a domestic abuse case. Give him a slap on the wrist. Pled it down.
That's crazy.
A cop. And yes, we have the story on that. If you don't believe me, ask. I'll tell you. So, just to close a file? I mean, something's not right here. But I don't want to go on for too long because you think about this endlessly. I know that.
Yeah, I do.
I know there's not a day that goes by that you don't think about this. But we are still working on seeing if the witnesses are going to be comfortable coming forward. We have an indication that could be coming very soon, like very, very soon, that they seem very comfortable with the idea now of talking. And so if they're out there and they're hearing this, we would definitely love to have your side of the story. But we're also looking for anybody who even anonymously would like to be, like to have aired out some of the stuff they heard from the driver. I will protect your identity. And if you're afraid of retaliation, I'm going to just say this. I've said this to Marcy, and I've said this now to Pam, and I say this to others. The best way to avoid retaliation is to speak. It is to speak. I know it sounds funny to say that because it doesn't seem safe if you think there's going to be retaliation, but your silence is already proof that retaliation is working on you. Think about that. You refusing to speak because you're afraid is retaliation. They have already retaliated to a level that has gotten you to say, I'm terrified to talk because of what they could do. You already know what they're going to do. And now you're going to walk around with that hanging, that anvil, that sword of Damocles, so to speak, hanging over your head for the rest of your life. Like, I know things, but I'm never going to say anything. That's terrifying. And the best way to get out from underneath that fear is to get out from underneath it by speaking about it. It's the best form of therapy you can have in these situations. So if you know something and you're afraid to talk, let me know. We will help you get out from underneath that weight. The best disinfectant for mildew and mold is sunlight.
Oh.
It's sunlight. The best form of disinfectant is sunlight. So if you're that afraid of the moldy, mildewy corruption that is taking place, come talk to me. Talk to Marcy. Let her know that you want to talk to me. We will shine light on it. And then if they come after you, then we're going to be like, we already told the story, folks, and look what they're doing to this person. And I have friends that will help tell the story. And you're going to meet that individual this week as well. Tuesday night, Spike Cohen from You Are the Power, who's now been made aware of Marcy's story and Pam's story. And when you hear Spike talk, when Spike's organization, You Are the Power, becomes aware of corruption, and he can track it down and prove it, he's like a bulldog. He's relentless. He's a nice guy. He's a teddy bear, but he's a bulldog. Can't promise results, but we can promise you effort. So, Marcy, to that end of You Are the Power Foundations, you had something you wanted to talk about before we close this up.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I haven't decided on a name, but I kind of like the Spencer Summerfield Victim Advocacy Foundation to help moms so they don't have to go through the things that I went through, or fathers.
She cares about dads too.
I care about dads and grandparents and siblings as well. So we can.
So you're thinking of helping people whether it be in Minnesota or other places, learn their victims' rights, where they're codified in their state laws or or in county codes and ordinances, and helping them fight for those, because as you've experienced and other people have experienced, a lot of
Victims matter.
times victims don't matter. And like in the state of Minnesota, the victims' right advocate is an employee of the county attorney's office.
Correct.
So they're not likely to rock the boat if the county attorney doesn't want to help out.
Right. And she was very incompetent in helping me find anything out for victim advocates. Victim rights. I had to look for most everything myself.
And you didn't
That's
even know
sad.
you had victims' rights
No,
until
I didn't even know I had victims' rights. And I think families need to know.
I think it was right before we met, or was it right after we met? I can't remember.
I kind of looked up a little bit, but trying to deal with grief and trying to deal with what Stinson was actually doing, and then just life. Some things just had to go on the back burner until you could figure out things a little bit differently. But now I know, and it's just really sad what has been done to myself, Jeff, my children, our children,
Right.
I should say, and my parents and the other people who loved Spencer. They deserve justice for
Absolutely.
Spencer. Spencer was a good kid, and I had empathy for the family. As
we said last week, last Monday night, we said,
yeah,
we don't want this kid to have his life ruined. We've already ruined one life, taken one life. We've
yeah.
had other people's lives drastically impacted in a way that's never going to change. We want him to heal,
Mm-hmm.
but we want him to change.
Correct.
And everything that's happened to him since this took place isn't conducive to change and healing.
No.
It's conducive to learning you can pretty much do whatever you want. And that's what he's learned. And now he's an adult.
Correct.
And that could lead to some really, really hard lessons being learned if he hasn't learned them already. And from the people behind the scenes that went to school with him, doesn't sound like he's really learned any lessons. It's
don't
kind of a
think he
joke.
has.
What people are saying about what he says. This is kind of a joke to him.
Correct. And it's sad.
And that's on him as an adult too, but that's on how he was raised. That's a commentary on how you were raised.
Correct. I'm extremely.
Yes, Becky, I'm calling you out.
I'm extremely angry at how the adults in the whole situation took advantage of both Jeff and I on trying to seek justice for Spencer. It wasn't just Mr. Stinson. Most of it was him, but I don't know really what happened behind the scenes. And just knowing what I know with looking at the evidence in the file and what my friend attorney and the one that I hired told me, he should have been charged differently, and I would have fought for him. If he was charged differently, I never wanted him to go to jail. I would have fought for him, but I wanted him to speak up, and I wanted him to help other kids know to don't do what he did. I think
whatever it was he did that we can't find out now.
Right. Whatever he was doing in that car to make him swerve over into the other lane. And like I told you guys before, my sister told me, he either was committing suicide, attempting suicide, or he was messing with his phone or doing something that was totally distractive. When you're driving a car going 55 miles an hour and you're not paying attention to the road, you're a reckless driver and you are negligent, grossly negligent, because you don't know what's going to happen.
And that's, really the big thing about all of this is that, like, every one of us has reached down and grabbed our coffee mug and taken a drink. Everyone, and no one's saying, like, everybody does it. It's the issue is not that people do it. It's how many times do you have to do it where you hurt someone or nearly hurt someone before you learn a lesson? And an understanding that distracted driving isn't just having your phone on.
Right. It's going through a stop sign and hitting somebody and killing somebody as well.
Yes. like, there are so many things that could be distracted driving, and we do focus on just phones in Minnesota, especially. Minnesota's a hands-free state, which is great because it, at least with it being hands-free, if you aren't, if you're not holding it, that's fine. But there's so many other things that are distracted driving. But you don't see cops pulling people over for eating a hamburger while they're driving. In fact, most of the time, you'll see cops driving down the road, eating a hamburger and using their phone, by the way. And yes, folks, and reading their laptops that they all have in their squads now. Like, no one's saying don't be on a phone call, because if you got a passenger in your car, you're talking to them. We know that. There's very few of us that are driving down the road not talking to. Well, it depends on how long you've, like, known the person or been married. In your case, you maybe you guys get in the car so you don't have to talk to each other. I don't know, but
I talk a lot. Come on.
I never guessed. But what we're talking about is not like your phone should be locked in your trunk. That it should be illegal for you, against state code, traffic codes, and then it should be a violation if you're driving down the road and you pick up your pop or your coffee or a handful of fries. Like, we all know, like, you literally could could look down to change this. Who listens to the radio anymore? Adjust the volume. Adjust the volume when you're tuning in your favorite music or your podcast or whatever you're doing. Hopefully you're listening to the podcast. Even if you can't watch, you can still listen. We're not advocating for that being charged. What we're advocating for is that when you do something that is clearly has done harm to someone else, you violated the non-aggression principle. When you take someone else's life or you do physical harm to someone else or their property, you violated the non-aggression principle, and that should be dealt with in a way that teaches you a lesson. Not ruins your life, but teaches you a lesson. And this young man apparently didn't need to be taught a lesson. And if anybody says to me, well, he's got to live with this for the rest of his life, folks, you don't know how people are. If you think that he might lose some sleep for a while, but it's not going to change who he is. If the things that are being said about him and how he's talked about this accident are true, it's not going to change who he is. And the next time it might be a bus full of kids and drunk driving. And then how will you feel, Mr. Stinson? How will you feel then, Kurt and Becky and Mr. Powers? How will you guys feel then? Marcy, I know we're probably not going to need to have you on for another show. You've talked about, the Spencer Summerfield Victim Advocacy Foundation. If you decide to go somewhere with that and you want to do a show about that, I'd be more than happy to have you on to do that.
Okay, that'd be great.
But I love the idea.
Me too.
Because we just can't trust that elected and appointed public servants are going to do their jobs properly anymore. But if you hear from anybody else, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm a caregiver, so if I can help somebody else out, that'd make me very happy.
We're talking about a woman who was very happy changing diapers and cleaning dirty butts for a very long time. I'm not that level of caregiver. That does not make me happy.
Oh, it was fun.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was. Got to see all those aha moments, and I don't know, it was a great time. I miss it sometimes.
I'm sure you do. Not for me. But if you hear from anybody else that wants to talk or is ready to talk, we will certainly get them on and tell their story. Even if it's 5 or 6 of them and they don't feel like they can fill a half an hour, 45 minutes, and an hour, and there's 5 or 6 and they want to do a roundtable, we could set it up that way as well, and then you could be part of that too. So I really thank you for your time and trusting me to tell your story. And it's been humbling to get to know you and hear your story. You have touched my heart in many ways throughout all of this, and you've opened the floodgates, by the way. I can't keep caught up right now. between Pam and not just Pam, now it's others. So,
Mhm.
so if you're reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I would love to talk to you about telling my story," please don't take it personal if I don't like schedule you for next week. Like it's not
It takes time.
yeah, Marcy can
And make
attest to the
sure,
fact
yeah,
that I
make sure you, yeah, make sure you
that
have all your facts and a timeline done
yes,
because you will have to make a timeline.
yes. And as I've told both Pam and Marcy now, that's mostly for you so that when you are ready to talk about it, you know where you want to go so that
Hmm.
you're not, squirreling all over the place.
Oh,
I will pull you back off that squirrel leash.
yeah,
So,
you did very well pulling me back on my squirrel moments, I do have to say.
well, Marcy, I thank you so much for
Okay, thank you
making
very
time for me
much.
and um,
And thank
make
you,
sure that
everyone, for listening.
yes, yeah, thank you for listening. And I know that some have reached out, so um,
Hmm.
Marcy and I will be in the chat when this airs, um,
Hmm.
and we would love for you guys to share it out and um, tell other people to start paying attention and helping people in their own areas, their own counties, their own regions, states, whatever, to start really paying attention to what rights you have that are codified as victims, because that's very important. You're the reason
Yes, it is.
the justice system should exist. It's to make you right, make your life right. And when the justice system fails you in that regard, then the justice system is failing all of us. So, Marcy, you go on, get out of here. I will do my little goodbye and
Bye.
thank you so much for everything that you've done.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Folks, Marcy, you guys know this. I don't use words like this very often, but Marcy's a hero. She's a hero to me. Um, she has fought for justice for Spencer from really the first day. And she has experienced what so many of you have experienced in your own lives. Justice is not easy to get when the justice system is not interested in you. What we've learned over and over and over again in the United States, in the state of Minnesota, is that ultimately the justice system really only cares about looking good. And and if it can do that without really taking care of the people that are wrapped up in it, then it doesn't care. I have experienced this myself, and many of you have as well. And that's why I continue to do what I do. Nothing's going to come into my life and change any of the things that are going on for me. But if telling stories like Marcy's and telling stories like Pam's and the stories of other people that I'm working on bringing forward, if that changes things and improves things, then we all win, and that's what matters. So once again, I want to thank the Angry Vet and IMAP for being show producers, and the anonymous person who has stepped up as well, and they asked to not be named. Um, they have done an amazing thing in their support of me, and I'm not worthy. And I can't thank all of you enough. I am not worthy of the support because I'm just me. I'm just telling people's stories. The people that are worthy are the people who have the stories to tell. But I'm very thankful for every single one of you who has subscribed and who shares the stories. I'm very thankful for every single person that supports through Subscribestar or through channel memberships here on YouTube or through Rumble. It it means the world to me. And you guys are going to have me at 4,000 subscribers before the end of November at this rate. I was hoping to get 4,000 by the end of December, and I don't know what's happened in the last few weeks, but we've gone from 3,700 to almost, where are we at right now, folks? Let's see here. Let's do a quick look. We're at 3,927. It's gone up since I started this episode with Marcy. It's gone up 8 since I started this episode with Marcy. That's you guys noticing and saying, hey, there's stories that need to be told and attention that needs to be paid. So thank you. Cannot thank you guys enough. Every one of you is important. Even my hate watchers and the FBI and BCA monitors that watch me as well. And Mr. Stinson, I know you're watching. You matter too. I hope that you learn some lessons. And I hope one of the first ones that you learn is that maybe you should just be in private practice, because you don't deserve to live off the backs of the taxpayers. Mr. Stinson, you are a drain on Wabasha County. You are bilking them to the tune of over $150,000 a year. And I bet if I sat down and calculated the median income of Wabasha County right now, you're making easily 2 to 3 times more than double 2-income homes in Wabasha County. You're not worthy of that. I don't care that you have a law degree. I don't care where you went to law school. If you're worth your salt as an attorney, get into private practice and prove it. See, it's easy to run for office when you know people. It's easy to get elected to county attorney when you're connected to business owners. It's easy to get elected when you're connected to people that sit on boards positions and they're going to back you. See, that's playing politics. It's not so easy when you have to go out and make a living for yourself and work for yourself and eke an existence out of the earth on your own. See, this way you don't have to worry about the farmers and the ranchers and the clerks at the grocery stores and the gas stations coming to you and paying you to help them with their problems. You just get to take their money from them through taxation. That makes you a thief, especially when you're not doing the job you're paid to do. So no, Mr. Stinson, I don't respect you. I don't like you, and I don't care for you. Because you're hurting the wage slaves of Wabasha County, of Minnesota, and really the entire United States. You're not doing your job. And the county board knows that. And that's why they're asking the questions they're asking. So it might just be the best thing for you to slink quietly off into the darkness that you crawled out of and open your own practice. Hang your shingle on a door somewhere. Go into probate law. Do wills. Become a defense attorney. Maybe actually help people who are caught in the system. Because you don't deserve the position you have. And I hope that maybe the former county attorney, will run against you. I hope maybe somebody else will step in and say, I can do this, and I'll do it for less. Because that's what the people deserve. They deserve a servant. They deserve a servant that will say, yes, I'll listen to the opinions of other attorneys. They deserve a servant, a public servant in their county attorney who doesn't have the balls to send an email to a grieving mother and say, and the next time you want to question one of my staff members, you can direct your questions to me. No, Mr. Stinson, you don't understand the First Amendment. Heidi is a public servant. And if Marcy and others have a problem with how she's doing her job, they have a right to redress that grievance directly to her. That's the way it works. You don't get to run interference for them. They need to answer for where they fail, not have you send out an email jumping down the throat of a grieving parent. And I will be sharing that email, by the way, Mr. Stinson. You don't deserve the position. Because to fill a position like you have, it takes a sense of humility. And having never met you, I can already tell you're probably one of the most arrogant pricks I've ever come across in the work that I do. And that takes a lot, because I've come across people like Kelly Don Martinez, who is the most arrogant person I have ever dealt with in the last 4 years. And I know arrogant because I can be arrogant. But I would take 10,000 Marcys. You know what? No. I'd take one Marcy over 200 million of you. Because she's doing something for the people that have been hurt. You're just a welfare recipient. That's all you are. And I only have one thing left to say to you. Sic semper.
We are going for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at